Well, welcome everyone to the December 17th, 2024 meeting of the Housing and Community Development Committee. Could we have a roll call to make sure we've got a quorum?
Chair Ravel,
Here?
Councilmember Burns, Councilmember Heracariz,
Here.
Councilmember Reed, Emily Maloney,
Here.
Trina and Tamara,
Here.
Fran Sweeney, Chloe Thurston,
Here.
Joanne Salome.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. And we're going to begin with introductions because we have two new members with us this evening. We're delighted to have you here. We'll ask you to talk about yourselves and then we will all introduce ourselves as well. Emily, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Emily Maloney. I'm a 9-year resident of Evanston. I own, manage, and live in a 3-flat in Evanston. And I also have a background in commercial and residential development. I also managed and was a leasing manager for, affordable housing and other projects around housing. And I'm very excited to be here. By day, I'm a writer.
Great, well, welcome. And Trina?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Trina and Tamara, and I've been a resident here for about 8 years, moved here with my daughter when I took a position with Kellogg in their social impact department. I have a background that spans financial services. I've been a credit analyst analyzing the insurance industry, local, national, as well as global with Bank of America and the Federal Home Loan of Chicago. I've been involved in microlending, providing small dollar loans to business owners across the Chicagoland, as well as nonprofit, workforce development, and education. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, we appreciate both of the expertise that both of you bring. That's really wonderful. Joanne?
Hi, Joanne Salome. I've lived in Evanston 46 years and lived in the 6th Ward, the 3rd Ward, and now I'm in the 2nd Ward. So I moved around a little bit. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. I also am a landlord. I have a 2-flat here in Evanston. So, and I was on the Housing Commission a dozen years ago.
I'm Eleanor Ravel. I'm the council member for the 7th Ward, and I've been on this committee for ever since its predecessor as well as this committee too. So,
Chloe Thurston. I've been in Evanston for 10 years now. I'm a professor at Northwestern, and among the other things I do, I've written a book on housing policy and the history of mortgage discrimination.
Fran?
Hi, I'm Fran Sweeney. I've been here just 2 years. The experience I bring is as a landlord of a small unit and now as a tenant of a large building. By profession, I'm an attorney, currently working in my son's law firm. Prior to all of that, I worked in the capacity of a legal aid attorney in housing, Medicare, Medicaid, and policy.
Juan?
So Juan Heracariz, the 9th Ward council person. I've been here in Evanston. I came to Evanston over 30 years ago to attend Northwestern, and I've lived and or worked here ever since, and been on this committee since I joined the council and was appointed. As someone who lives in the 9th Ward, knows a lot of folks who like through the school community, I know how hard it is for families to find housing, whether it's rental and or purchase. So this is I think where we can make a huge impact for people's lives, and so that's why I'm on the housing committee. And I'm also really excited to have both of our new members. They all live in the 9th Ward, so this is very exciting.
Taking
So
over, right?
housing is very important for us on the south end of town, so I'll leave it at that.
Great. Okay. Well, now we can do our business. I think this is really an exciting set of committee members, and we look forward to doing our work. So first, we have public comment. We have three sections of public comment. So first is the draft amended citizen participation plan. And Eric,
I don't think I signed up for the right one, then I'm sorry. I meant
That's
to
fine.
Speak about, I think you guys have some type of thing about affordable housing for that, correct? Something with-
right, yeah.
That's what I wanted.
Oh, okay, fine.
I'm sorry about
It's confusing. Tina, did you want to comment?
Hi, good evening, Tina Payton. So I wasn't clear of where the citizen participation is. As you know, I participate almost every meeting, and next year, excuse me, I will be 40 years speaking at city meetings. Participation is very important, and I don't think that sometimes that we don't get enough time to say what we need to say in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And it's very important for this committee to meet. For those that don't know me, my family has operated affordable housing units for, I would say, usually I say over 50 years, but really it's 100 years. Because my grandmother provided Black students that went to Northwestern housing in her home when they couldn't get housing in other people's apartments. So I think that I would like to, I don't know if there's going to be a presentation or where I can find this, but citizen participation and you all listening and being able to hear what we have to say and comment, and the feedback going back and forth is very important. So I hope that in 2025 we can have more opportunities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I think that's, nobody else has signed up for, we have, as I said, 3 different comment periods.
For the citizen participation plan comment period, we did not get any other comment in person. I do have summary of comments we received in writing.
Okay, thank you.
So we got some feedback and suggestion to use public instead of citizen whenever possible. As a reminder, we refer to the citizen participation plan because we are required by HUD, but whenever possible and even within the plan, we actually use community members instead of citizen. We want this to be open to everybody that is part of this community. They also suggested we further elaborate on the way the city affirmatively engage residents. We'll be providing some clarity around the different ways that we're doing outreach, and clarifying that in the plan. They also suggested to include a reference to the city language access policy. That's something we can easily do as well. And some suggestion around formatting and table of content, which we will also include in the version of the plan.
Great, and so we'll make some revisions reflecting that?
Yes.
Yep, great, okay, thank you. Well, now let's move on to the community member participation for the consolidated plan itself. And Eric, we do talk about affordable housing there. Would you like to? Yeah. Sure, yeah. Right, yeah.
Well, hi, my name is Eric Passett. For some of you who don't know me, I'm the owner of North Shore Apartments and Condos. I've been a property manager, landlord, rental agent for almost 40 years in Evanston. So between me and some of the associates I work for, we represent about 30 buildings in Evanston. Most of them the courtyard style vintage buildings. The reason I'm here tonight is I think one of your biggest things that you guys are promoting is affordable housing. Yet the environmental board, which I know is not what you guys are today about, but it directly affects what you're talking about. The environmental board, which consists of a lot of people, a lot of the council members, or at least they're voting on it, plus the mayor is signing on, is in favor of this also, is making all buildings that are over 20,000 square feet have to switch over from from using natural gas to electricity. Well, if that would anything about kill affordable housing, I can't stress that more than anything. Our buildings are all but maybe one are all natural gas. So if you're over 20,000 square feet, which most of our buildings are, so if you take a 30 unit building or 35 unit building, forget about that. It's kind of not environmentally sound to throw out 3,000 stoves all at once because all our stoves are gas. So you have to get rid of that, but that's not what I'm talking about. We'd had all of our boilers are gas fired. So by year 2050, that would no longer be able to be used because they'll have to be, the grid can't even handle it. Forget about that for a minute. That would cost us as landlords, each building, about $500,000 because you have to get rid of the boiler, you have to upgrade the electric. So your only choice is really to put in not gas forced air, but forced air units or some type of forced air units in the unit because, we have to remove all the radiators. I mean, there's only one way to really do it. We can't, we're not a house, so we're in a building, so it's forced air is the only other way to do it. So to upgrade each unit is about $30,000 because you got to upgrade the electric in the whole building. You got to put in the forced air units. You got to do all the duct work. So where's that money going to come from? So now we're going to tack on an extra $200 to $300 a month on our rents for the next 30 years to pay for that. If you amortize that over time. So how is that affordable housing? And I know that 7 out of the 8 or city council members are behind this, plus the mayor. And it just seems pretty much, I'm going to say it bluntly, hypocritical. Because how can it be affordable housing if not only is it crippling to the landlord, we're not going to eat this. So we're going to have to pass it on. So we'll take out a long-term loan because we can't do it all at once. So you say by 2050, which sounds like a long time away. Thankfully, I'll be out of the business by then. But the biggest supply of affordable housing is landlords, people like myself. We try to keep our rents reasonable, yet this right here would be completely contrary to that because we're going to have to invest, again, $500,000 plus all the interest you pay on that. It's probably close to $1 million a building. We have to find a way to get it back. So I know this is the wrong place. You guys bring up recommendations, but I'm going to be at the next city council meeting talking about this also because it feels like it's all but said that it's going to be passed. That's what it kind of feels like here. So, and if this city's all about affordable housing, why not just let the landlords be a part of it? Yet you're going to use federal money to do it when you could use all private money like ourselves. We try to keep, if you look at our buildings, we're not high-end rentals. $1,300 for $1,200 for studios, $1,500 for 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms under $2,000. That's pretty affordable for Evanston, maybe not for other places. So I guess I just want to bring that up as a food for thought that should be discussed because I read this the other day and I was just infuriated would be an understatement. But just can't believe that here we are talking about affordable housing and this is not affordable housing or just does not promote affordable housing. So thank you.
Yeah, so I think our sustainability staff ought to convene a meeting of building managers to talk about how it's going to work for you all because we can't. It's a big challenge. Yeah.
Well, without being sarcastic,
Sure.
It's impossible because if we have to become electric, if we have to switch from gas to electricity,
Right.
our whole building is heated by gas.
Right.
So it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of
Right.
thousands of dollars per building.
Right.
So we're talking in the millions.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah,
I mean,
no, well, I
I just thought before they even thought of passing this, they should have reached out to landlords, which is feel like it's, to make it more realistic.
Right.
I mean, why not get rid of gas stoves. I mean, not gas stoves, but make them, so we try to make no more pilot lights on our gas stoves. So, the electronic starters. That helps a lot. That was a huge expense. Again, in the hundreds of thousands. We just did that because, it is environmentally sound.
Right.
Plus, we're hurting people's health by that. So we've done that 99% of our units. If we don't know it exists, then we change it once I see it. But this would be quite impossible because our electricity, not only can we not do it, the grids can't handle it.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Eric. And Tina, did you want to talk about this? This is the comprehensive plan part, consolidated plan.
Good plan.
Chair Ravel,
Yes.
I
Oops,
just have a
sorry.
point of information. Mr. Passett, so this was discussed and there was a big presentation at the last 9th Ward meeting where they go over this. The deadline for building electrification isn't next year after this pass. So, yeah. And so there's, just let me finish. So the plan is there will be a citizen run review board that will be working with the buildings, and building managers will be working towards being energy efficient because that will save you money. And they acknowledge that there are some buildings, depending on timing of, replacing appliances and boilers, they'll work with buildings. So it's not that you're gonna have to rip and replace in 2 years. It's just working towards upgrading electrical LEDs, showing that you are doing things to cut your energy costs. So it's not a drastic, and they're going to be working with people because they did talk about boilers and big, infrastructure, HVAC systems do take a long time. So, well, I don't know what you're showing there, but if you go on the web, okay. Well, if you go on the web page, you can watch the presentation. And so I'm, they're not trying to, even all homeowners, you can't expect people to just go electric next week. So just, yeah. So.
Thank you. Excuse me, Tina?
Yeah, hi. Just kind of a comment about what Eric said and what Councilmember said. So next year, 2025, so we're discussing 25 years. I've managed a property for 25 years, and I've never gotten any help from the city, from any agency. So what he's saying, 25 years is a blink. And I've gotten nothing. So I agree when he's saying, let's look into this, because it seems that landlords are left behind. It's always a push for the tenant, which I'm not objecting. We didn't get help when we were under the moratorium, where nobody paid rent. Where did that leave us? And that was a devastation for someone like me, who's a small landlord. I just had a tenant walk out on 10 months of no paying rent. $24,000. And where's my help? But I see restaurants getting $650,000 grant money that they don't have to pay back. So this committee here is voting on things that affect my livelihood, and we're considered not businesses. So it's more important for Jane Doe to get a restaurant rehab than to rehab our places where we're providing what you say we need, which is affordable housing. I feel some kind of way about that, where meeting after meeting, we spend $1.7 million on a skate park. Do you know how many people I could house? And I could turn my building electric for $1.7 million. But we don't get any of that. We're talking about pickleball, $600,000 to change the courts at James Park into pickleball. 600,000. Let's focus on that. How many people could I house for 600,000? Or how much could I repair my building where I had a shooting 3 years ago and I didn't get any help? How about more focus and be for real about helping the landlord? So I understand what you're saying, council member, but you need to understand what we're saying. We don't get any help. Where's the grant money? I don't see it. But we have money for everything else, all kind of entertainment for the city. So when we talk about plans for 2025 and 2045 and 2050, does it include us? We're a business too. And soon I help the homeless. I'm going to be homeless with these regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. And then we have one last public comment. I think it's Tina again. This is, oh, wait, I'm sorry. We had a,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So we do have summary of written comments received for the consolidated plan. We had a correction that we received, a question that was also a correction. One of the commenter rightfully noticed there was a typo in the number of Evanston residents that are that were listed as disabled or with a disability. The correct number is actually 5,633 residents. There was quite a big difference. The number listed included an extra digit. So that's a major correction that we will be making in the plan. So we thank the commenter for that. And then there was a commenter that noted that additional barriers that were rightfully referenced in the report included significant barriers to housing development that the local government bureaucracy puts onto projects, including uncertainty about project approvals, zoning, sprinkler system requirements that are disincentives to developing affordable housing. They had also mentioned demolition fees. I do want to mention that demolition fees are not applicable to affordable housing developments. There's a special exemption. Thank you for that. And they also commented that any reference to the draft comprehensive plan or zoning code or Envision Evanston 2045 should clearly be identified as draft plans. We've made sure that throughout the document that's always referred as draft. And that's it.
okay, great, thank you. And now we're ready for our regular public comment about things that are on the rest of our agenda.
It
Yep,
is
yep.
kind of related, but I'll, okay, so I see that, that in the plan, there's money for inspection department, 250,000. And so this money is, in this conversation, looks like it's for targeted areas.
Or CDBG.
Correct, CDBG money for targeted areas. And that you're going to give, if I read, because you tried this before, and you're going to target property in this map, which predominantly is where my property is located, primarily where Black and brown people live. And you're saying you're going to give the city inspection department $250,000 to harass me some more. Something sounds wrong about that and discriminatory. I can show you places that aren't on this map where the city department needs to be and they're not. I believe that this money should not go to that. We also had a discussion about rental registration fees at City Council, which will be coming up again next month. That meeting should be here, not at City Council. And you're going to raise our fees so the inspectors can come and inspect. Something is all confused and wrong about that. And I object to this money, and I object because this is discrimination when you're targeting certain areas and you're given money to target us. I believe, and also NSP2 and CDBG areas are inspected every 2 years, which is discriminatory, especially if we do not even receive the money. I hope that this money, I look forward to some kind of presentation, that this housing rehab money goes to those people, which I'm included, in these areas that you're targeting and saying it's not a good area, we need to fix it up. Some of you know me, and I've been here, just as I said, 25 years speaking as a property manager and 40 years speaking as a citizen. And at this moment, I do not believe the city is serious about affordable housing when you keep approving luxury housing over and over and over again. And people like me do not own, operate, or rent in the downtown Evanston area. We can't afford it. When I go to the meetings, I'm the only Black person in the meeting for the 1st ward or the 7th ward. Very few. 6th ward. So we're talking about fair and equitable. Let's think about that. And I'm going to ask the question again. How many Black people or brown people own and or operate in downtown Evanston besides the Robinson family? Let's focus on that. How many? And I hope that I'm selected for some of this housing money and not go to someone who doesn't need it or repeat. So I'm going to make that clear too. There's people that you approve that get money more than one time, more than 2 times. There should be a limit on how many times people get grant money, not the same people. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tina, just to answer just one part of your comments, I mean, CDBG money must be spent in CDBG areas, so that's.
I'm in CDBG forever.
Okay.
And never have received a dime.
Yeah. Well,
I have been asking, and you know, Alderman, you visited my
I
property
did.
before.
Right.
And I've never received anything from CDBG. Nobody, I've tried to ask Alderman prior to you all. As I said, I've been speaking for 40 years next year. And my mom was alderman in 87 to 93. And I started going to meetings 2 years before she was ever alderman. And no time, and we've been providing affordable housing. There's very few people that accept a Section 8 voucher. There's very few people that'll take a connection voucher. There's very few people that take Catholic Charities or any other organization. We do, and what do we get? A kick in the pants. We get a code violation. We don't get help.
Okay. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
And did we have anybody else commenting on the rest of the agenda?
We do not have any other public comment. And if you may close the public comment for the record, that would be great.
I hereby close the public comment for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So now moving on to our regular agenda, the first item is approval of the minutes of our November 19th meeting. Could I have a motion?
I will move the approval of the meeting minutes for November 19th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, and I think we can just have a voice vote on this. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Okay, and we have abstentions from people who weren't at the meeting, right? Okay. So now on to the meat of our agenda here. First is we're going to be voting on recommending to City Council approval of our 2025 entitlement grant allocations by goal based on what's estimated to be our 2025 CDBG and home grants, as well as a reallocation of $4,830.35 in 2023 CDBG administration funds. So could we have a motion just to get this on the floor, on the
I
table?
will move the discussion and vote to recommend the 2025 entitlement grant allocations.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. There we go, Marion.
Hi, everybody. Marion Johnson, Housing and Grant Supervisor. So we received, multiple questions from a committee member around the consolidated plan that were specifically about the details about the plan. So I can give you a choice of, we can discuss just the allocation by percentage, or I can start with the questions and then we go into the allocation by percentage. The question refer more to the actual plan, which we'll vote on later, but I don't know if we want to start conversation, have those answers before we vote on anything.
Do what you think best.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to go through the questions then, because even though they're not necessarily related to the allocation, I think it's important for everybody to have the information they wanted to get. So we received some question around clarification around the number of housing vouchers in Evanston and the numbers that are showing in the charts. The charts are showing a number that's 11,594 vouchers, where the narrative shows 559. The reason for that is because the charts pull data automatically from the point in time count through the Alliance and HAC, Housing Authority of Cook County, and that includes the entire North Shore region of the continuum of care. So that's why there's a difference. Second question we received was they wanted to have a little bit more information around the numbers shown in the numbers of workers and numbers of jobs chart. That data comes from the 2016-2020 American Community Survey. It's also an automated data source that populates the charts. It's compiled from several sources of data, the longitudinal employer household dynamics, as well as the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the labor force characteristics for the current population survey. That was for the number of jobs. For the number of workers, we get information from the American Community Survey about the labor force for the geographic areas with population of 65,000 or more. And that also comes from local area unemployment statistics program, which provides monthly estimates. So I'm hoping that provides some background. Essentially, that data is kind of compiled for the charts, and then we provide some comments around that information. There was also some question about the funds related to putting assets to work, which is an initiative that was mentioned in the plan. Question around whether the money has been received, whether there's risk under the new Trump administration, an example of what a city asset can be. So the fund for putting assets to work, that grant opportunity has been received. And those are funds, that's a grant to support the effort, not yet to build anything. We do not foresee these funds are at risk because they've been received already. Examples of city assets are listed in the Putting Assets to Work report that is posted on the city website under the Putting Assets to Work webpage. However, I can give a high-level overview. They include 4 classifications: legacy, policy, yield, and hybrid. So under legacy, we're talking as examples, not specific buildings that have been identified, but public libraries, museum, community centers, civic centers. Policy would be fire station, parks, childcare centers. Yield would be parking lots, vacant parcels, office buildings, and hybrid are only conceptual. None have been identified. That would be, as an example, library with a mixed income housing building. So that. There were questions around whether what other investment will be in the Fifth Ward and where is the Welcoming Center. So example of investment in the Fifth Ward include the lead pipe replacement projects and the 2025 water main replacement projects, the Twig Sparks improvement, which were previously voted by this committee, the renovation of the family focused building, Green Homes Evanston, as well as school district investments. And then I can provide some information around the health hub as well, around the location. There were questions around where the 9 city parking lots are located, those that are cited as far as opportunity for redevelopment. They're part of the putting assets to work. That is also listed in the putting assets to work playbook report that's listed on the website, and is included as well in the staff report to City Council on April 29, 2024. And include, I have a list here for anyone that's interested. It includes 9 parking lots in various areas that are city-owned parking lots that are listed as immediate potential opportunity for redevelopment in various areas of the city. Do we know how many rental units are substandard? So I assume that the question was referring to substandard as defined by the report, which included rentals without kitchen or bathroom facilities. The data we have available for the consolidated plan includes renters up to 100% area median income and state that 125 renters have substandard condition. That's renters and not units. I don't have data per unit. And also it goes only up to 100% AMI. However, it's unlikely that at that higher income level above 100% AMI, that household would stay in rentals without kitchen or bathroom facilities. Any rental property that does not have functioning kitchen and bathroom facility would be cited as inhabitable by property standard if they came across that situation. Then we have, does a city have an inventory of vacant residential property that are not for sale? We do have a vacant property list, mostly based on complaint issues. There is a vacant property ordinance and property owners are required to register the property as vacant. The city usually follows up to find the owner and get any property violation resolved. Many are bank owned or foreclosure property, and that can be a little bit challenging as far as getting some follow-up. And then there's a question around the 35 vacant lot that were mentioned in the discussion around the recent zoning change that was done a couple years ago around small efficiency home, the smaller lots that are under 3,300 square foot. And they were in the consolidated plan, we were mentioning that there was about 35 vacant or underutilized lots that had been identified through that effort. The question was whether those lots were privately owned, most likely, but not necessarily. I don't have specific information, but it's very likely they are, for the majority, privately owned. And that is the end of the questions we received.
Did that set of questions spark any other questions from committee members?
I had one question about, actually just two. One's like a clarification, maybe I could ask it later, but so what's the difference between a 1-unit detached structure and a 1-unit attached structure? Because the report distinguishes between them.
1-unit detached structure and a 1-unit attached structure.
Yeah, on page 78.
I'll have to look at the,
Duplex townhomes. You get duplexes that are side by side. So you've got two houses and they're attached. They have a party wall.
Right, but the 1-unit detached. Oh, okay. But wouldn't that be a 2-unit structure then?
Yeah, it is. Sometimes their terms are weird.
Okay, so it's
HUD
just the way that the
also
term, but that's what the
considers-
term refers to. I
There
was
are
just
also
trying to.
things when HUD says they consider 1 to 4 units as a single unit.
Right.
And
Okay.
then they only get it above 4 units when they do certain regulations.
Okay,
So
that
there's some
helps.
real
No,
weird
no,
terms.
I just needed to wrap my head
Weird
around that.
terms.
And then just one other quick question was I guess this was from the ACS data, but it said that there's a 10% vacancy rate with apartments, but I've heard other numbers like in this committee and in other reports. And I was like, what is the...
Yeah, so we actually, we felt the same way about the chart. So we actually addressed it in the narrative and found different sources to be able to kind of back up what the vacancy was, really what more recent number was showing, and how the vacancy was actually showing in Evanston. I don't have offhand the actual narrative that's below the chart, but we did address that in the chart because those numbers felt slightly different from what we usually see. Yes. Some of that, I think, is also because of their definition of what vacancy is.
Follow-up question on how do you obtain the data for vacancies? What measures, benchmarks, et cetera?
So all the data that is 99% of the data that is in the chart pulls automatically through data sources that HUD requires us to use. Most of it is the American Community Survey from 2016 to 2020. So a lot of the time in the narrative, we layered in some other sources that we quoted in the narrative to be able to provide some additional context and also to be able to include maybe more recent changes, because 2016 to 2020 does not include any of the impact that COVID may have had on housing, as an example.
Certainly.
That's why you'll find that, as an example, at the last meeting, committee member Rodriguez was referring to the chart with the price points for housing being pretty behind. And yes, because we're essentially always chasing the data but we try to keep it consistent. Yeah.
Okay, any other?
Yeah, I mean, I know from years past, does the city even have a full list of all rental property in Evanston? You know, that was always an issue, and not everyone pays the fee. Like I forgot to pay a couple of years and stuff. But I mean, do we have an accurate list of rental properties and the number of units?
We have a list of rental property that are registered. Some of what you're referring to sometimes is we have a list of property, but we don't necessarily have a way to sort and merge through property owners or landlords. I think part of that conversation that you're referring to is when we're talking about programs for landlords. We have a list of property registered at rental, but that doesn't always necessarily allow us to regroup everything under one landlord. There's different setup, LLCs, and structure that can make it a little tricky. We have a list. We have data around the number of rentals through some of our policy maps or other tool that we use. Whether we have a very detailed at any given day of any property that's specifically rented, I would say not to that granular of a level. If tomorrow you're deciding to rent, you're required to register, there might be some gaps there.
Okay.
The numbers that we have as far as rentals, though, are not necessarily coming from the city, but coming from the data that are provided through surveys as well.
Okay. So Marion, do you want to
Sure.
talk about, help us?
Actual topic.
Yes,
Sure.
Item A here, right?
So just to kind of remind the committee, I know we do that every year, but so on this action item, we're discussing specifically the allocation by percentage of goal based on the estimated dollar for the grants and what is proposed, particularly in the draft consolidated plan, but also specifically for 2025. So essentially, those numbers are numbers that we reviewed quite a few times already. So we have 47% of CDB. Essentially, we've taken into account the projection with having less CDBG projected for next year and the next few years with the information we have available to us. And what we've done is we've concentrated more resources for CDBG around affordable housing, with 47% of CDBG going to the affordable housing goal. We have reduced the allocation for livable community goal to 18%. That would include public facility and infrastructure projects. We have kept the public services goal at 15%, which is the maximum that we can allow to for that goal. We've reduced economic development to 0%. We had a small amount in the past that was allocated to economic development. We found that the use of CDBG can be a little bit challenging for economic development. There's a lot of restrictions. That was, given the fact that we had cuts, that's one of the things we've discussed with the economic development team, as well as based on the feedback we received from the public. And then there's the standard administration levels as well. Is there any questions around those allocations? I know we've discussed it a few times already.
Could you remind the committee what is the public services?
Sure. So public services would usually be, so there's a slight change. Public services is usually funding that is allocated at the goal level here, but that is managed by social services. It's usually split in between 3 categories. Social Services Committee handles allocation. They actually just did that last week for 2025. And they merge CDBG funding as well as local funding for case management, safety net services, and support services. That includes public services for the homeless, organizations such as books and breakfast, education, food, mental health services, and other kind of safety net services. We're making a change in this consolidated plan in the sense that we're keeping the public services, but we are suggesting specifically allocating public services to housing services. And the reason for that is because there are housing services that are currently funded under the social services program right now. And as you may all remember, we lost our allocation of ESG Emergency Solutions Grant, which was funding a rental assistance, emergency assistance program, and eviction prevention program. By changing slightly how we're allocating public services and specifically calling out housing services, that may allow us at some point to have a CDBG funded rental assistance program. But we can only do that under the public services cap. So that's going to be something we will be working and researching and bringing back to the committee in the future. But essentially that gives us the flexibility, should we find ways to be able to do this, to do it.
Isn't TBRA considered a rental assistance program?
TBRA is considered a rental assistance program, has different requirement, and only $175,000 is allocated per year. And TBRA was existing on top of ESG. They had each their own requirements. TBRA is a tenant-based rental assistance program. It's not an eviction prevention program, so it's usually for people that are not currently housed, that are getting into housing. What we're looking at potentially, we've essentially lost our source of funding for eviction prevention, so we're looking at making sure that we have options in the future. That was one of the city council goal as well, to make sure we had additional resources for rental assistance. So we wanted to carve out the possibility to do so in the future.
Anybody, committee, do you have any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I just have one comment. I know we discussed the renewed TBRA funding and that there are going to be more applicants. Do you know any idea when we would get like a report back, how many families and when we can get information around?
Once we're out of the cycle of approving the draft plans, we go right into the cycle of reporting on 2024 activities to HUD. So you're guaranteed to have some update on the program and the TBRA program, particularly in 2024, by the end of March, because that's when we need to submit the report to HUD. Usually that would come to the committee around mid-March. If there's any specific information that you're looking for before then, we're happy to come back and have some staff update or anything related to that.
Okay, I was just curious because I jogged my memory about
Yep.
that happening. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joanne?
Well, since Congress is running as smoothly as it always does, do we have any idea when we will know the final numbers? Yeah.
We don't have any ideas when we will know the final numbers, but we have any ideas of when we will not know the final numbers. So as of right now, they're discussing the continuing resolution that's supposed to be voted by December 20th, which is this Friday. And so far, everything we've heard would be that that continuing resolution is getting us at least till March, which means we're probably not going to hear anything or nothing's going to be decided till March. And then even then, there might be some more delays. So what I'm expecting next year is a very late announcement or release of grants, because even once the budget has been voted, there's still usually at least a month before HUD actually give us the numbers, because they still have to run all the formulas. We have a general understanding of where the budget lies and which direction it's going, but then to get our actual final number, there's a little bit of time still.
Can you spend those funds though? Not until they're allocated officially, or?
Yeah, the way it currently works is that's part of the reason why we have to approve this draft plan this month, is so we're able to have continuity on the programs. And so we're able to keep working as January 1, even though we haven't received the funds. Generally speaking, we never get the funds. Even if it's voted super early, we get the funds almost mid-year. So the systems are in place to be able to keep going. It's not ideal, but we've been able to make it work.
Oh, boy. So I noticed the livable communities goal. We're not actually planning to spend that money this year, though. So is there
No.
a reason that not to allocate it to something else this year to
Yes.
spend it?
So there's multiple reasons. I need some funds to be able to combine them for 2026. $200,000 or $250,000 a year is not going to necessarily, like most of the ALES application we get in the recent years were more in the 350, 450 kind of range. So the goal is to be able to combine things. I thought about trying to see if in 2025 we should allocate to something else. I also want to make sure that we don't over allocate to certain areas. We're moving quite a bit of funds already in affordable housing. And we have some backlog funds we're still working through, so I didn't want to go too heavy around that goal. And then if I allocate those funds to something else, such as economic development or something else, then in the future years, I don't have the combined dollars to be able to do a project under livable community. So it's kind of finding the balance in between having too much and too little, and making sure we have ways to meet timeliness as well.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So committee, are we ready to vote? So we have a motion then to approve the 2025 entitlement grant allocations as just discussed. Do we do a roll call, Anna? Okay.
For the record, who motioned?
I think we,
think I did.
Councilmember Heracars made a motion. And did you, and
No.
Chloe seconded it, yeah.
Okay. Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Heracariz,
Aye.
Emily Maloney, Trina and Tamara, Fran Sweeney, Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Joanne Salome.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Okay. Next, we're going to be discussing a motion to approve, CDBG funding for programs and projects based on estimated 2025 CDBG grant amounts. And for CDBG housing rehab, $450,000, and housing and code enforcement, $250,000. So could we have a motion?
I will move the review of and approval of the CDBG funding for City of Evanston programs and projects based on an estimated 2025 CDBG grant amount.
And a second?
A second.
Okay. Yes, Mary.
Thank you. So the first item of discussion is the housing rehabilitation program. This is a housing rehab program that has funds available for low moderate income homeowners, as well as property owners for rental property. There is $450,000 that is within the CDBG 2025 budget. There's also, including in the chart on the application, there's additional funds. There is rollover funding from previous years that have yet to be expended because we had a slowdown during COVID, as well as the upcoming and ever elusive NSP2 transfer from HUD that we're hearing is happening any minute now. So I think we've had this in previous plan. If you keep hearing about it, it's because we're waiting to get it, but we will get it. And then there's also about $140,000 of IDA fund that are provided through SEPA, our partner on this program, that is able to benefit Evanston residents. The program provides 0% interest deferred loans for housing rehab activities, particularly addressing life and safety issues. And we're going to start opening, historically the program was including single family condos as well as 2 flats. We are now also going to be opening it to multifamily rentals as well, because we understand there's an increased need with older rental properties to have rehab as well. I have Rob Anthony that is here to answer any question that you have about the program. He's from Community Partners for Affordable Housing. They are our partners as far as construction management of the project. And this program's budget is shared between the administration through project construction through SEPA, as well as Evanston city staff.
Since Rob is here, it's too bad not to let you say a few words.
Good evening. I'm Rob Anthony with Community Partners for Affordable Housing. I think Marion explained the program well. We administer the owner-occupied rehab program throughout Lake County and other certain communities. Those programs are structured a little bit differently. We manage the whole program in terms of doing the marketing, the outreach, doing the client's wait lists, the application selection, and then going through the construction management and loan docs and all that type of thing. In Evanston, we keep the selection process with the city. So Marion and the city staff handle the wait list and the selection, and we simply get sort of the project turned over at the stage of rehab and construction management here in Evanston. And that keeps it, I think, a little bit simpler, because we have the other programs, and it would be very confusing if the city is marketing the city's program and we're marketing IDA's program, and so we consolidate that to make a consolidated wait list. The one difference between the IDA funded projects is that those are forgiven over a 5-year period, so they're not a deferred, or they're a deferred forgivable grant as opposed to just a deferred grant or a deferred loan.
Okay. Yep. Committee, any questions about that?
Yeah, is there a limit to what any one project can get?
Yes. There is a maximum of $50,000 for single family and 2 flats, and $20,000 for condo properties. Yeah.
And with the IDA funded, there are 2 different programs. One's $40,000 and one is $60,000.
Is that multifamily?
No, those are single family.
Okay.
And so would any Evanston properties be eligible for the IDA funding
Yes,
as well?
and we had 2 this year.
Mhm, okay. And what talk to us about the wait list? Is it a big wait list?
Yeah. So we just went through soft relaunch of the program, and we went through the entire existing wait list with new staff. So we went through all of those participants and were able to identify everybody that was eligible under the increased property value rules, as well as had projects that were eligible and were income eligible, and people that were still interested. So we're slowly rebuilding the list. There definitely will be additional effort to do more outreach in the next year, especially as we put more resources toward the program. But there is not currently a very long wait list for this program.
Okay. Committee, any thoughts?
Yeah, just, so if we're opening up to multifamily, does this $20,000, is that per unit then?
So
What is
for
the-
multifamily, it's going to work a little bit differently. We haven't yet set the application process. For single family owners and 2 flats, it's a open enrollment throughout the year. We may change that, but for now, this is how it is. For multifamily, we're just going to do a set date for open enrollment during a specific period of time. We're with outreach to landlords. And then there likely will be a limit of probably around $100,000 or around that range. Those kind of rehab will be specifically limited to specific type of construction and renovation as well. We did one project a couple years ago, I think. I'm losing either this year or last year. And that was for a roof renovation as an example. A roof renovation. Roof replacement. So we're likely going to keep it to specific kind of projects that are either external or that are not interior construction or updates such as like kitchen, bathrooms.
Yes. So who will administer this program? Like your committee?
So we have staff on our team that handles the wait list and the pre-applications, as well as anything related to loan compliance once the project is finished. And then SEPA is our partner for everything else once the pre-application is done and construction management through the end of the construction.
Will any of this we heard talk earlier about inspections in certain wards and targeting neighborhoods, and we realize that's all tied into the money available. So will any of this money be in response to needs that arise from inspections, or how does
Yes, there's so there's a process where the inspectors have information to be able to provide information to the property owner on how to join and enroll in this program. There's also the multifamily program that will be open as well. And then I'm happy to answer any question and specific comments around the target and code enforcement at the next agenda item if you'd like.
certainly
I
I
can
just
provide
thought of
some
it.
context.
Thank you. I just thought of it this time. So
But
thank
yes,
you.
it's a very good question, and yes, it works in combination.
Okay, well then I think we're ready for a roll call on approval of the CDBG funding programs as we've just been discussing.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Heracariz,
Aye.
Emily Maloney,
Abstain.
Trina and Tamara,
Abstain.
Fran Sweeney,
Aye.
Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Joanne Salome.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Yep. Now we need a motion to vote to recommend to City Council approval of the amended citizen participation plan. Could we have a motion? Let Councilmember Heracariz, your new role.
I will move the discussion and vote for the recommended approval of the draft amended citizen participation plan.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, here we go.
I don't have any specific updates or presentation about the citizen participation plan. We presented at last meeting the minimal changes we're making to the plan that were specifically regarding to emergency condition and natural disaster to allow for remote participation as allowed by the state.
Great, okay. Then I think we're probably ready to vote on this one.
You want to vote?
Yeah. I think we can just do, I think we're ready for roll call.
Yep.
Thanks. That's okay.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Hidakaris,
Aye.
Emily Maloney,
Abstain.
Trina and Tamara,
Abstain.
Fran Sweeney,
Aye.
Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Joanne Salome.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. So next, we need a motion to recommend to City Council approval of the draft 2025-2029 Consolidated Plan and 2025 Action Plan.
I will move approval of the draft 2025-2029 Consolidated Plan, 2025 Action Plan to the City Council following receipts of 2025 grant amounts.
Second.
Great, okay.
Same here. I can answer any question that the committee may have. I think we went into detail around what the plan was about. Any other question, I'm happy to answer.
Does anybody have any questions? It's quite a document to wade through.
It is.
Well, seeing no lights coming. Oops.
Really minor questions. We've been through a lot of this before. Thanks for, this was actually really well written. I enjoyed it, which is
That is absolutely extremely
Well, I
surprising,
learned
but
a lot
very
about like the
great to
local
hear.
economy too, and job structure and what have you. But and I think this question has come up before, so forgive me. But I was trying to reconcile sort of some of the numbers from this and then from between this and the Envision Evanston document. And so one of the ones was the sort of like about population loss. And so has Evanston, it was unclear to me, like, so
we have different numbers.
okay,
because
yeah,
we're
it
using
seemed like there were
different
two different
sources.
sets of numbers across those.
Yes, we had the same conversation, so you're right on point.
So is it just because HUD requires a certain standard of?
Envision Evanston used the latest data, which was 2018 to 2022 American Community Survey data. We have to use 2016 to 2020 American Community Survey data. So there's some essentially minor changes where we're saying one thing because there's a slight, I think it's a slight drop and Evanston is a slight increase. And then they're projecting, so essentially there's some changes because they're using more recent data. So we tried to address it when we could in ways that were key. We also didn't want to confuse the entire document and refer in the narrative to completely other numbers and have all the charts mentioning other things. But whenever there was, particularly like as an example around vacancies or anything like that, we try to kind of layer in other sources and other reports to be able to kind of provide that context. But yeah, it makes it a little bit harder to digest.
I can just make a comment too that all of these data are the American Community Survey. And of course, that is statistical projections based on small samples. Our 2020 census count was 78,110. So we actually gained, but then you get the community surveys. And if you look at the 1 year versus the 5 year versus it's just all over the map.
Thank you.
Yeah, Fran.
Hi, I have a question on the chart on page 10, I think.
I might go to my computer if you don't mind.
No, it's fine. What is code enforcement on the con plan goal? Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's code enforcement is actually what we're going to be discussing. So code enforcement is the efforts with the property standards inspections for all properties within Evanston.
Okay.
Essentially. So in this plan, the goal is code enforcement to be able to sustain and improve rental properties and improve the condition of living for low moderate income residents that tend to be majority renters. And that includes the program, funding for the program that does rental inspections and property inspection in the city.
I just noticed that it's half of what it was in 2023.
It is, yes. And I am, yes, okay. So I was confusing myself because there was an agenda item that was skipped. That's why I'm confused. So we were going to discuss housing code enforcement right after housing rehab.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
that's not you. That's on me. So yes, the budget essentially is being reduced because we have a projected reduction in our grants. And we worked with Property Standards. They have other sources of funding, and they get funding from the general fund. So their overall budget is not being reduced, but the contribution of CDBG is being reduced
Okay.
to the program. May I suggest, if there's other question, that we get back to the housing code enforcement application topic,
Right.
because I think there was quite a few questions that we
Yeah.
haven't addressed. Yeah, and I
the
would
question, the question about how often we do inspections and that
Right.
whole, yeah.
we have Margaret Spar that's here to talk about the application. I just want to make sure any questions are answered before there's a vote about the actual plan. I wouldn't want to leave the committee without
So we should wrap up
context.
this part and then go back to building inspections.
if that's okay.
Sure.
Yes. So for everybody, we are back on item B2, 2025 Housing Code Enforcement Application. That was the second part of the item B. We discussed the housing rehab application, but we haven't discussed the housing code enforcement application for $250,000. So this is funding from CDBG that goes to the property maintenance, property standards program. And as I was explaining, we have Margaret Spar from the City of Evanston that's here to discuss the program. This program, the way it works is we have the CDBG target area map that defines areas in which CDBG funding can be used. It is majority low, moderate income areas. It does not define which property are going to get inspected or not. The program is run separately and for the whole city. It defines what properties can be, what activity can be billed to CDBG. And there's very specific differentiation in this. That doesn't, the other item I wanted to address is there was a mention of CDBG property being inspected every 2 years. I believe the CDBG properties are inspected every 3 years, which is the same for the rest of properties. But Margaret Spar is here to answer any question and to discuss this funding application and this funding request, as well as the program in general, if the committee has any questions.
Be good to hear. Yeah. Well, welcome.
Thank you. So does anybody have?
Could you just start maybe by just describing how the building inspections program operates?
Absolutely. So the rental program is something that's been in place with the city, but kind of fell apart during COVID. So we are re-implementing, rebranding. I've spent the last year or so recreating our database because records had fallen by the wayside. We have started doing rental inspections again. We started actively doing them September 30th. And after compiling a list of registered rentals, going through, trying to update information, I've started scheduling for any rental property that I couldn't find a last inspection date, because there are a lot of rental properties that haven't been inspected for a very long time. Those ones that I couldn't find dates for are the ones that have been started, regardless of the area that they're in, if they're a CDBG property or not. That's not a consideration. It's just making sure that we get into those properties to inspect them to ensure that there's no issues there. So we have 5 full-time inspectors right now that are out there doing rental inspections. I am the property maintenance supervisor, so I'm scheduling those appointments, trying to reach out to as many landlords as possible, make myself available to answer any questions that they have, to assure them, that we're trying to make this as painless as possible. We want a smooth process, and I want to work with the landlords. Ultimately, our goal is compliance. So if anybody has, they're out there doing rental inspections Monday through Friday. They have about 20,000 units to get into between the 5 inspectors overall throughout the city. So I'm scheduling their inspections roughly every 15 minutes.
Committee, you have questions about?
I just want to say, I just had an inspection on my 2-flat. I bought it in 2010. This is only the second inspection I've ever had. I don't remember what year the other one is, so mine might have been one that didn't have a unit. And it was very simple, so the reinspection is the 30th, so.
Chloe, did you?
I don't know if we're getting to this next, but I had some questions about the budget, because it changes a lot between 2024 and 2025, unless I'm misreading it. And I was curious about some of the things that go to zero. Like, it looks like there's no computer software, or am I?
The funding for software, I believe, was incorporated somewhere else.
I can answer some of those
Yeah,
things.
so it was more, I mean, that was just one example, but I was just kind of curious about sort of not used to seeing things
Go away. We have, this is a change in some of our community development budgeting. Software that's been incorporated in another place is shown in.
It's budgeted somewhere else.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other thing is we've taken we used to have little line items in all of our different divisions, and they're impossible to sometimes track, and sometimes the things aren't only to a division. So some things that disappeared have gone into community development admin, and they're just billed as a lump sum. They're not tried to break out by. So it is kind of confusing. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the property maintenance program and how often properties will be inspected, because that's something Margaret she does this all the time, so she doesn't remember that the rest of us, that a lot of other people aren't. We are implementing the program that we talked about, which is with routine inspections, when the next inspection will be is based on how the inspection results are. And I don't have it off the top of my head, but the easy one is if there are no violations, and this is per unit. This is not like if you have a 30-unit building and, you're or a 1-unit building, it's the number of inspections the number of violations per unit that actually counts. No violations, your next scheduled inspection will be 5 years out. And I don't remember the exact numbers for the 3 years out and the 1 year out. And one of the things that in the former attempt to try to really focus on our properties that need attention, that was when the city decided to make CDBG target area properties inspected every 3 years, and everything else was inspected every 5 years. Now, we never really had the staff to actually implement it on that schedule anyway, which was a challenge. But the big problem is it made an assumption that residential rental in lower income areas was not well maintained, which is absolutely not true of many of the properties. And so Tina and others who complained about that had a good reason to complain, because it isn't treating them fairly. So by setting the next routine inspection schedule based on the results is much more fair to the property owners, and is part of the other challenge, and the thing that we are losing CDBG funding just based on reductions in CDBG funding. But the other assignment we were given by our city council was to figure out a fee schedule to recoup some of the costs of doing this program. Because in the past, there was only an initial, when a property, not a new property, but an existing building was first registered for rental, there was a $200 inspection fee. And after that, there were no inspection fees, and there were no, there's just no fee schedule. So it's clearly not something, what it amounts to is basically the general fund was just funding all of that cost. And so that's being changed. There is a proposal before council. There will be a discussion at the meeting, the second meeting in January, and hopefully a fee schedule will be passed at that time.
Just to follow up on, as you mentioned, the like new schedule and sort of the number of units that we have. And so like with our current level of staffing, how many sort of inspections could you do in a year?
Well, you know, Margaret's team has done
Since
2,000 since,
since we
starting.
started this in September, their first day of doing this diligently, we started September 30th. And so far to date, we've gotten into approximately 2,200 units.
September 2024?
September 30th of this year, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And this week,
That's
they're
great.
not doing any of our regular rentals because they're all out doing Northwestern inspections. So the landlords all got a break this week from us.
I do want to point out that this is the first time we have been fully staffed, that we've had 5 inspectors, probably since, I'm digging back into my memory and it's not going to be completely right, but probably since the mortgage foreclosure and the depression, the Great Depression, or this recession, excuse me, not the depression, that followed, because we really, we lost a lot of staff at that time and are only now just rebuilding it.
Yeah, I think a couple times this evening we've had people ask questions around data and what data we have, and my ask would be that as we're kind of ramping up and gathering this information, I know recently we hired a digital services specialist who's working on the website, and one of the things I would love to see would be some of this data incorporated to the open data portal that we used to have. We've had, speaking of staffing issues, we've not had someone kind of manning that side of things, but it'd be really great to start, backfilling, and because it is hard to know exactly what's
all
going.
about numbers and statistics. It really helps to
Pinpoint.
paint
You
the
learn a
big
lot.
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it also.
It's a clearer understanding.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I also think it would be useful data for other, like public works, and you can kind of, and learn things. So that's great. And it's nice to also to finally meet you. We've emailed a few times, so good to have you.
I've only been here with the city for 2 years. So.
Okay. Trina, is that your light? Okay, please, Emily.
I guess my question was, you mentioned that depending on the number of errors or issues that the inspection or reinspection will be sort of determined. Is that publicly available information? And I'm sorry, I know I'm brand new to this. And then is there like a list of items or expectations that are made available to tenants as well as landlords?
We don't publish the information at this time, but we have talked about having, sort of like for restaurants, you could actually get the inspection schedule.
Sure.
One of the things that we've talked about doing, and we haven't made a decision, is to actually recognize the properties that are really getting good inspections and are, making them, noticing. And that hasn't been decided, but it's something that, again, can help motivate maintaining properties. But the other thing, it's also tied into with the new residential, with the amendments to the residential landlord tenant ordinance. One of the things that has to be landlords have to provide, if they have the information, is the utility costs for the unit. And so really a lot of it can help educate tenants on where they may want to live and what it's going to cost. So there are a lot of things that we're looking at doing, and these are things that we'd love to have feedback on from landlords. So
Yeah, and just to kind of, and maybe another part of the answer to your question is when I'm sending out the email with your appointment letter for any landlord, they're going to get the appointment letter that tells the date and time of their appointment. Then there's an attachment, it's called a property maintenance brochure. That is the items that we're looking for. And then there's also the electronic link or the paper form for them to fill out the rental registration form, just so that we can keep our records current. That's the best way for me to update our information so that we can have as current a database as possible. So a lot of the information is in that brochure, and that brochure is available on the city's website for anybody to view, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very informative. So, so now we are back to, I think, being ready to vote on, where were we?
Chair Revelle, if I may,
go
I
ahead.
think for clarity, for the record, it would be wonderful if we can get a vote that specify on these two items, the housing code enforcement application and the housing rehab application, the dollar amount that the committee is approving, just so that we have this on the record.
Okay,
So when making the motion,
right.
if you can name the two amounts.
Okay, I thought we did, but
We voted on the item, but I don't think the sub-item, housing rehab application in the amount of $450,000 and housing code enforcement application in the amount of $250,000
Okay,
was
I will
did
move.
say that, but
I will move the approval of the 2025 CDBG housing rehab application for the amount of $450,000.
and housing code enforcement for 250.
And all, and the 2025 housing code enforcement application for $250,000.
Okay. So, great. Yes.
Chair Revelle,
Aye.
Councilmember Hirakaris,
Aye.
Emily Maloney,
Abstain.
Trina Entamera,
Abstain.
Fran Sweeney,
Aye.
Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Joanne Salome.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you so
And now
much.
we're back to the consolidated plan motion.
We are.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you have more to?
I do not have more to present to or provide. I'm ready to. We were in the middle of questions
right, yeah.
when there was a question
Right.
about code enforcement.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so committee, any more questions, discussion, comments about the 2025-2029 draft consolidated plan and 2025 action plan? Then I think we're ready for a vote on this one as well.
Oh.
Aye.
Councilmember Hirakaris,
Aye.
Emily Maloney,
Abstain.
Trina Entamera,
Abstain.
Fran Sweeney,
Aye.
Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Joanne Salome.
Aye.
Motion
Thank you.
passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now the question is whether, yeah, so I guess move for discussion of the Envision Evanston 2045 comprehensive plan, and then we'll see what we want to say.
I will move the discussion of Evanston 2045 comprehensive plan.
Seconded.
Okay, so this is our opportunity, if we feel ready, to put together some kind of statement to send to City Council about what this committee thinks, recommends, or whatever about the Envision Evanston, the draft Envision Evanston plan. So I'm just going to throw it open for discussion to see what
Chair Revelle.
people would like to say.
Chair Revelle.
Yes.
There were some questions from committee members
Oh,
that Sarah
yes,
Flex
there
would like
were.
to
Yes, I'm
address.
sorry. Right, thank you, okay.
Hello, committee members.
Hi.
Thank you for your interest in your discussion about the comprehensive plan. So I'm going to just sort of give short summaries of the questions and then try to, answer them, and then you can ask more questions if you have them. One question was, or one point was that this is a really large and very, there's just a ton of stuff in this document. How many goals will be achieved, and kind of what brought out this document? Where did the idea for this document come from? and should it be considered in different documents? You know, it's a big lift. And yes, it is. Comprehensive plans are actually authorized by the Illinois Municipal Code in Section 65 ILCS 5. And it is a law that gives the municipalities Plan Commission or Land Use Commission, as we call it, which is the body that we have to have as per the state's code, the power to prepare and recommend a comprehensive plan for the current and the future development of a municipality. So historically, comprehensive plans have been very much focused on the built environment and land use. But the world's changed an awful lot, and that's why there's a whole lot more information in them, because so many different things are overlap in the goals of the council, for example. You know, the council, and so the goals of the draft comprehensive plan are really designed to address the goals of the council and the goals of the community that came out of the early outreach to define how our community should be and what components are important. And that is fostering a healthy community, strengthening the local economy, prioritizing environmental sustainability, investing in transit options, increasing housing diversity, and creating equitable opportunities for all, and celebrating arts and culture. So this plan incorporates all those things, but what's very important to remember is it's talking in broad, strategic approach for a 20-year period. So it's not necessarily, exactly when and how all of this will be implemented. We're going to have to work on that, because it doesn't do us much good if we have a plan and we don't do anything to implement. But there are also sub-plans that in many, many different areas that are actually the implementing, the ways that we'll get into details of implementing. There's a Parks and Recreation, there's a Parks plan in the works right now. There's a housing plan in the works right now. So it is broken down, and it will change and be modified over the years about exactly how we implement it. Another question, how will the goals affect current city policies, aside from zoning, and what rules and regulations will be affected, and how or when will the council review them? Well, the comprehensive plan is a guiding document for the city's growth and development for the next 20 years once it's formally adopted, but it is advisory. So zoning, which is adopted by ordinance, is the law that actually manages land use regulation. But there are other ordinances that cover many of the other things. There are going to be ordinances that are for parks. There are going to be ordinances for streets and stuff like that. But the comprehensive plan hopefully drives the development of the appropriate laws by ordinance that actually then accomplish the goals. One of our land use members said we need to separate the concepts of density and housing affordability. Increasing density does not automatically result in increased supply of affordable housing. Well, that is true. They are separated, and they have to be separated, but they're also related. And one of the things that's happening is the housing market has changed a lot. It used to be low and moderate income, the people who needed help with their housing costs were the people whose incomes were at or below 80% of area median. And that's changed dramatically with the rapidly rising cost of housing. So we're really looking much more broadly at housing overall. And one of the ways of looking at that is, where is housing cost burden? And housing cost burden is if a household is paying more than 30% of its income for housing, gross income. And right now, about 49% of all Evanston renters are housing cost burdened. That's pretty scary. And what's happening is that missing middle that you sometimes hear about, and there's not an absolute definition for that, but it's between low, moderate, and people who can afford market rate. So usually it's, someplace between 80% up to 120 or 140% of area median. There is the housing supply for that market is really, really diminished. So we do have to, and do we have to always invest in it? Does it have to have public money? In some cases, it seems to be that it needs public money. But the state of Illinois is actually doing a lot of work right now to address missing middle housing. And the governor is just enacting some new legislation. We don't know how it's going to shake out yet, but it's actually has some similarities to the federal pro-housing grant program, and that which was designed to provide financing for municipalities that have removed barriers to building more housing and creating more housing. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out. It's something we're going to be watching carefully. How will TIFs be affected by the plan, or will TIFs affect the plan? TIFs kind of work in their own area. They have their own plans and guidelines, so they're not directly affected, but at the same time, their goals frequently align with those of the comprehensive plan because they focus on areas that need specific types of development and improvements. Okay. Should the city be responsible for enhancing residents' employment skills? That's always a tough one. There are certain things, we do have, the city does do some work. We have a division for, helping people find jobs, workforce development. That's the term. But we also have to work with, we're not going to be the ones who actually provide. I don't see the city as getting into providing trade schools and things like that. That would really be outside of our area, and I think could be a dangerous area to get into. So we have to work with both but many of the workforce development, what they're doing, some of this was funded with ARPA money. They were working with individual entities like Endeavor Health to train young people for jobs in healthcare. And so there are ways we can contribute to that, but we have to work with partners. How will the city interact with the schools in this goal? Well, that's something we're always exploring too. We help them build a house, which is helping kids learn geometry and also getting one housing unit. But one of the things that we're actually talking with ETHS about is how can we broaden opportunities for different students, whether it's through traditional four-year college, going to two-year colleges, getting all sorts of other trade schools. And that's a big focus of ETHS. And interestingly enough, that's also something that in some cases we've got the Ryan Field project helping try to support. So it really, I think we have to look at it as a community-wide effort that we can contribute to, but I don't see us as being the primaries in some of that stuff. Another question is, also we're open to any suggestions anyone has, by the way. Will Northwestern funds be used to achieve some of the goals? Northwestern funds will be used for a bunch of different goals. In some cases, there is money that is allocated from that Northwestern contribution to the city for specific things. Part of that is housing. We are right now getting $1 million a year, and once the concerts start, then we will be getting more from that specifically for housing. There's also money that is designated for sustainability, for implementing the CARP plan. And then there's a bunch that is not restricted or targeted specifically to something. Does the city have sufficient staff to work on the goals? Wow. That's a tough one. Part of that depends on the pace and how much has to be done at one time. I'm going to really be careful on that one. But we have very aggressive goals, and we have very aggressive housing goals. And frankly, one of the real challenges is it's really uncertain what's going to happen. The federal government had been working to really focus on the development of more housing, and not just building new housing, but renovating existing housing. A lot of that work is in limbo until we see what the incoming administration is going to do. They've forwarded some rather interesting ideas, which I don't necessarily think are the best things in the world, like allocating federal land specifically to build housing, which seems to me to be counterproductive because we don't want to go and build housing in the middle of nowhere and also build on land that probably is being used in other ways. It could be natural areas that are important to keep. It could be farmland. I don't know quite what they're talking about. They own, ranch land out in the middle of, it just, we're not only going to have to build housing, then there's going to have to be infrastructure that I don't see it as necessarily cost effective personally, but, that's all I've heard so far on that. And when I was talking about the goals, do we have sufficient staff? We're really looking at competitive grants, and we don't really know what's going to be the outcome of a lot of those. We did apply for the second year of Pro Housing grant through HUD. We haven't heard, we don't know the timeline, but many of those grants allow you to budget for staff, which I think is very important, because one of the most difficult things is when you get grant money, but you can't use it to actually implement the grant. You have to use it for activities that you don't have anybody to manage then. Doesn't work. Hopefully some of this will work out. And then, is it realistic to have a document that covers 20 years? Because there can be so much change in 5 to 10 years. And that is, again, something that is really changing about how we look at and use comprehensive plans. We're going to have to look at this plan and how we're addressing it periodically and make changes. It's inevitable. We have things that are changing at a faster rate than ever, and we're just going to have to be responsive to that. And that's why the goals and strategies are frequently quite broad. We're not going to say, hire this many people in this year and do these things, because we couldn't realistically plot that out over a 20-year period. Probably anything we would put in there would end up being wrong, much, or inappropriate in a very short period of time because of that pace of change. So I think those were all the ones that we received in writing. Then there was a comment that the timeline for council approving the document should be open-ended. It really has to be, making sure that the appropriate time is taken. That is something that City Council is going to be discussing, the timing at their meeting in January 13th. And staff will implement whatever City Council tells us to implement in terms of timing it as best we can. Any other questions that people have on this? And then I want to,
Fran.
Hi, this is definitely just a beautiful document, I want to say, and I'm not trying to be patronizing, it just really is. A couple specific questions. The first is there any sense of the cost burden of housing nationwide or statewide? It's serious in Evanston, but is this a typical picture nationwide of what's going on?
There is a shortage of housing, and housing is too expensive for large portions of the population. Okay. There's a great deal of variety from community to community, and even within, like in a major metropolitan area, there are, areas where housing can be really inexpensive relative to every place else, but it doesn't have amenities generally. It doesn't, the things that you need to make a really healthy community and give people ready access to the things they need on a day-to-day basis is what not having those is where the housing costs tend to be, quote, affordable. So then you have the problem of how do you get to a grocery store? How do you get,
Sure.
talk about food deserts, all that type of stuff. So, but the housing crisis is actually nationwide, and it's also worldwide in many, many cases.
Sure.
I mean, you hear what's going on in parts of Europe.
I was just in Spain. They were demonstrating there.
And Barcelona has passed laws saying that as of 2029, I think it is, there can be no more vacation rentals, because what's happening in some of those cities is the entire city is basically being taken over for tourists or by tourists,
Sure.
which doesn't work either.
I'm just, and I don't know how to articulate this really well, but I'm concerned about the impact of the zoning issues that are before different committees and how that would impact the plan, or how the plan might impact different zoning decisions that come up. And so that's my statement.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a question in there, but is there something that you would want to say in response to that statement first?
Sure. We are making the recommendations to change the zoning are designed to address some very specific things. One of those is economic segregation within our community. We say we want to have an economically integrated community, and Evanston has broad economic diversity, but it's separated. Higher income people in certain neighborhoods, much more, not exclusively. We have some very mixed neighborhoods, but we have others that aren't. And a lot of that's driven by zoning. Residential zoning that allows only a single house is exclusionary to people who don't have money for the most part, because you got to have more money to be able to afford to buy a house, or even if there is rental there, which there isn't a whole lot of rental in our single family neighborhoods, but it's generally much more expensive. And so the zoning that says recommendation that there should be able to be up to 4 units of housing per lot in what is now single-family zoning, is designed to address that. It doesn't say the single-family homes are all going to be torn down or should all go away, and they won't, as far as I'm concerned. It's just not going to happen that way. But what it does is it allows flexibility for people to develop properties differently. Right now, the way our zoning is designed, if you are a housing developer, you're going to make the thing that you're going to build what you can make the most profit on. And if you can only make one primary structure on these lots, you're going to build the biggest, fanciest house you can, because that's what you're going to get the most money for. If you have an option of doing a 4-unit building that is the same scale, the same footprint, and the same height, it's not necessarily going to be deeply affordable housing, but it will be more affordable, and they will be smaller units that are automatically more affordable in areas that are generally expensive. Does that make sense?
It does, and I appreciate that. I think what I'm hearing and reading is something different from that, is that Evanston is made up of a number of different kinds of neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And what would be bad about embracing the cultural and structural differences of different neighborhoods and pouring the resources into embracing and developing cultures and support for those different neighborhoods. And if somebody wants to live in a large house in a neighborhood with large houses, to me, it's an imposition to suggest that maybe your neighbors are not going to then have a large house if you've already built a large house and have an expectation to live in one. Conversely, if you like apartment living, and your neighbors are your friends and you've been in this area for a long time, why not enrich that area with more of what that is?
Well, I guess I don't think of the character of a neighborhood exclusively defined by the housing stock. I really think it's more the people who are living there personally. And I got to tell you, our neighborhoods have changed. The neighborhood I live in, virtually every house has built a substantial addition on. So they've done that because that makes their houses more valuable. But having a multi-family property doesn't necessarily, next to a single family property, doesn't necessarily devalue the single family home. Because look at much of Evanston east of Ridge. We have very, very mixed neighborhoods. You can be going down a block and there can be 3 Victorian mansions, and then you can come to a courtyard building or duplexes. There are duplexes in those. So, you know, I think that by trying to define exactly what can be built to that great an extent just isn't going to address the goals of an integrated community, and also isn't going to provide options that people are now looking for in housing.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I think I'll second part of what Fran said about the comprehensive plan and the document. I think staff has really been working hard on this. I mean, we had our first Envision Evanston 2045 meeting for the 9th Ward, I think in March of last year. And, you know, I was really curious as to what the community feedback would look like. And the document, I think, really reflects the community values and what we want to see in an idealized, you know, future version of Evanston, right? So I think, you know, the comprehensive plan, I think, is the easy part in this. And then, you know, we were like, well, how does that translate to zoning changes? And I think what we do, like what I'm asking folks out there to do is really look at the goals and then also how our, you know, really great staff that know housing, how they're translating our end goals and how we get there. So, you know, I think one key thing that I think people are a little bit nervous about is the change from R1 to allowing up to a 4-unit building. One thing that I've been telling folks is that the building size and footprint and setback in the neighborhoods will stay the same. I mean, if you go by, I mean, I can think of it in the 9th Ward, there's a few buildings that like you walk by them and you don't know they're a duplex. Mm-hmm. You know, they're the same size as the buildings right next to them, right? Mm-hmm. If you just drove down my street and didn't like look very close, you wouldn't know that there's a few 3 flats unless you're, you know, really into like, you know, rental properties and like, oh yeah, that's yeah. So I think allowing that everywhere makes a lot of sense. And I think, you know, we have a real uphill battle for affordability and housing. Just in the past year, I think, you know, we have to be doing like 10 things to move the needle, right? And so I just want folks to realize that, you know, our zoning plan is, you know, draft, and we're working towards getting to someplace where I hope we meet these ambitious goals of the comprehensive plan. So looking forward to more discussion around this.
I also want to point out that we have lots of lots in our zoning districts that do not conform with the requirements of those zoning districts. And that's one of the things we're trying to do is make more, the properties were platted and built before zoning was applied. So we downzoned it, okay? That's just the matter of fact. It's like we have a number of areas where we have 25-foot lots. Nowhere in our zoning does it allow 25-foot lots, but we got a whole bunch of them. So is it fair to penalize those property owners and say, well, if you want to do anything, you've got to go through a minor or very likely a major variance before you can do anything, which is a whole process, which is expensive and time consuming. That's really not fair to them. They didn't create the zoning that made their property non-compliant. So, we've got that. For example, in R1 zoning, 49%, I think, are non-compliant. And that means the lot size, which is supposed to be at a minimum 7,200 square feet, is less than that. And if you look at, go up along Crawford and the streets in northwest Evanston, immediately east of Crawford, and the lots are virtually none of them are that size. And you see those same pockets in other areas. And then you see in areas where there is, where lots do meet, if it might be R2, where the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet, you may find a pocket of these much smaller lots that don't conform there too. So the housing was built for different household needs and different affordability, to provide different, and so we're trying to make greater flexibility for the people who own these homes or live based on zoning, so that, as I say, more of those properties actually conform with the zoning.
I guess I'm kind of echoing some of this. Just I'm really impressed with the document overall, and with the effort to try to engage the community in a lot of steps of it. I know it's very difficult. I've been to one of the visioning meetings, and I mean, you could sort of see the grit involved in terms of trying to get folks who are really hard to reach. And I've been impressed with that part of the process. Also just sort of thinking across domains. I think we get really siloed, here we have sort of one mission, even though it often sort of overlaps with sort of, or encroach, it sort of relates to other committees too, right? Or to other sort of bodies in the city. And so it's kind of nice to have this moment where we can step back and kind of actually talk across those different areas, right? Land use, environment, sort of economic development. And I don't think we get to do that. I think it sounds like there was a demand to simplify the existing zoning code anyways. And I think there seemed like there was a lot of sort of a sense that it's pretty complicated, and even just having fewer sort of districts is probably useful.
We're reducing to 17 from 34.
Yeah, I mean, so, I think we were sort of like, doing a bit of an exercise with that, just like when we were doing the inclusionary housing ordinance, for example, part of what was happening in that update was just sort of making it a little bit simpler, and sort of easier to understand and to use. And so I think those are all great. I'm personally, I like the, idea of trying to bring in more sort of missing middle housing. I live in a ward that has sort of a huge range of housing types. It's great. At the same time, one of the things that I noticed at the envisioning exercise that I went to was, like the issue of housing for families is a really big one. People have to leave because they just, can't. It's just easier to move into other communities. Sometimes it's kind of hard to stay. And so I think things to sort of, any sort of measures that can just chip away at that, I think would be good. And again, it's kind of nice to live in sort of areas that have lots of different types of housing, and sort of you can stay in a community for a long time too. We bought our house from someone who downsized into a condo, and like they didn't have to move that far away to do that. And so I think preserving that's a good idea. I had one really minor suggestion, which was just, I was reading the Illinois policy landscape section, and it's like so down on the state of Illinois. And then, as you mentioned, that seems to be changing a little bit. And so maybe the language needs to sort of mention that there have been some recent measures.
Yeah, and that really was very recent.
No, exactly.
Earlier
No,
this
I mean,
week.
we've
You know, I
received
mean, it's brand new.
this plan has been,
Yeah.
predates
Yeah.
that. But not entirely, though, because when we were talking about the inclusionary housing ordinance, I mean, so some of the units that were already sort of building more, set aside more affordable housing, we're doing that in response to a tax.
And that was passed in 2021.
Right. But so, that means it's not that the sort of other levels of government haven't been doing anything. And so I guess I would
They're doing, this is really, Illinois is starting and probably is farther along with this than many of the other Midwestern states.
So we don't quite say that in here. We're kind of, so I would sort of suggest maybe being a little more diplomatic, just not even diplomatic, but I think we could be a little bit more precise about or concise about sort of what is happening at the state level or what folks are talking about.
If I can, I do want to point out that in that work that Governor Pritzker was just brought forth, they're looking to help make it possible for developers to build that missing middle housing. Yeah. They're looking at creating sources of funding for that. One is saying a certain percentage of Illinois pension funds need to be invested in housing. Apparently, the Illinois pension funds are investing money in this kind of housing in other states. And the governor is saying this is not good. So there's that. That's one of the examples. And they are also talking about tying eligibility for competitive grant funding from the state, the same way that HUD is tying it to making changes to make different housing types, to remove barriers to building housing overall and making it developing broader ranges of housing types to meet the needs of different economic groups. So
yeah, I was really excited.
It is really. I'm
to
very
see
excited by that too.
I think the only sort of thought that I had, general thought about the plan, is that there's sort of a challenge in having so many goals and not listing an actual priority, because at some point those goals conflict. And, I think some of this already came up when Eric was sort of talking about like the climate, goals kind of, can potentially conflict with housing affordability. Another is, there's sort of a lot of, there's some suggestions about like, we need more metrics and more sort of impact evaluation. And I mean, sure, yeah, I mean, it is great.
Yes.
I love that stuff too, but sometimes that can slow.
You can bog yourself down with statistics that you're not acting on.
I mean, sometimes you can kind of bog, yourself down in procedure and process. And I guess that's the one thing that, and I don't know if it's appropriate to put in this kind of mission statement kind of envisioning document, but there is the question of like, well, what happens when these things conflict with each other when we haven't listed a priority?
Right. And we haven't really addressed that. We have said there are going to be conflicts, but exactly how to resolve them has to be.
And then something that you mentioned that kind of made me maybe look towards an answer, although maybe it's not a good one, is you mentioned that this is a plan itself that you expect to revise, which I thought was interesting.
To look at and adjust, not necessarily major revisions.
So it's not just something that will sort of be tucked away on like the city of Evanston's website.
Right. I mean, we may find that some of our strategies to address the goals aren't working because of other change,s so I think we have to continue.
So the idea is to actually revisit this and sort of
look at it. I mean, more looking at are we accomplishing our goals, and is our plan helping us do that, or do we have to look at new ways? That's the broad concept. Just as we're developing this plan, we said it would be iterative. It's not quite making it iterative, but the speed of change is so fast now. I mean, there's just been so many different types of things that are happening. And I think, I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole idea of the energy efficient buildings. We're starting out focusing on the start of that focuses on buildings of 20,000 square feet and more, 10,000 square feet for the city buildings. But we have a whole lot of smaller buildings that it might be easier to address making them more energy efficient and all that thing than some of our buildings that, like our 3-floor walk-ups, those are actually, we know that's going to be very difficult. And there is an appeal process so that for buildings that say they can't, an example was used, like, what if somebody just put in a brand new boiler? And then they're told, well, now you got to invest in going all electric, and you've just paid a huge amount of money. So you can apply and say, I can't do this now. This is my alternative, what I will do. And I need to have this many years to amortize the cost of this and be able to put in something at a later date. So that is in that plan. And, there are some real issues because in some cases the technology is,
It's
I haven't
changed a
been
lot
in some of those
20 years too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but the more and more technology is coming out that make things more able to use electricity that then have been able to do it cost effectively. I mean, the electric boilers, as I understand it, simply are so inefficient it would cost way more. I think that's right. Well, he's not still here, but that is, so we're aware of those issues and we know that they have to be looked at and balanced against all the other things. And in fact, in a staff meeting, that was one of the things we were talking about, all the different, like, how do different different parts of the city see this affecting negatively, positively? What are we going to run into? It's a heavy lift.
So
We
you
all
guys are
know
already
that.
thinking about that, though. Just in terms of the question about 20 years and being, I think it's a good idea to kind of sort of project out, and it's not a constitution, right?
Right.
So we're not
Right.
sort of bound by this, and
Right.
But it does seem like a good way to kind of figure out what we should be doing in the short term, if this is kind of where we think we want to be in the long term.
Right.
Joanne?
Yeah, those questions again were for me, but I mean, my brain is on overload just reading all these plans and everything, and I've gone through most of the zoning too. But as far as, as a realtor, I see different figures, but as I've said before, we are short in this country 4 to 8 million housing units because after the recession between 2010 and 2020, the builders didn't build much of anything. So it's not just here, but then we're landlocked. We can't grow anywhere but up. And then I went to, was it the second ward meeting or the meeting about density downtown? Well, these people living downtown, no, we don't want any more high rises, and we don't want to look like Chicago or whatever. So I said, well, of course, I'm older myself, but I said, these people aren't going to be around in 20 years. But anyway, a little dark humor there. But, no, again, and my alderman said, well, in a city of 78,000 people, there's over 80,000, opinions and everything. But again, going back to the zoning, it's almost all parts of Evanston. You can see streets with flats on them. And I lived in the 6th ward when I was married, and I think of Park Place, which is a big street with big setbacks, and there are flats along there. I'm thinking
the eastern edge especially.
Huh?
Yeah, the east, the part getting close to Green Bay.
Right.
Train.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. So, and I live in a 2nd, and there's just flats all over interspersed and everything. So, maybe whether a 4-unit is a little too much, but anyway, that's something the council will
To that,
decide. But
you keep in mind that if a lot is non-conforming with the new zoning, there are going to be, we're looking at limits to how many, in other words, if your lot is supposed to be 6,500 square feet and in that zone, which is what the recommendation is for what is now the current, the revised, the changed R1, then you wouldn't be able to have the same number of units.
Right. Yeah.
And how to balance that is a question because, we need larger units for families that are more than just, our 2.35 person average family or whatever it is right now. Those fractions of people are really hard to figure out. But the reality is households are smaller overall, then much of the housing in our single-family zoning areas, especially in the north and parts of the east, were designed for. Many of those houses actually had much larger families living in them. I look at buildings like what was the District 65 headquarters. It was a mansion, it's a mansion on Ridge. And that was converted into 3, I think, condominiums, all of which are larger than many single-family homes. And then they built on the outlots. I mean, so I think we've seen some very, very appropriate redevelopment of existing buildings to accommodate more units. And I also think that we may have more people wanting to live not in standalone units, shared housing of different types, including, just co-housing is a term that when you look up co-housing, there are all kinds of different types of co-housing. But in some cases, you have a household or a family, what we would typically, that have their kind of living space, their bedrooms and some small common space and bathrooms, but they share kitchens with other people. And this is one of the things that different people are looking, these types of things are ways people are also looking to build a community and a support structure when our society has really resulted in a lot of social isolation. And that is considered, I think Great Britain was the first one to declare that their biggest health issue was social isolation and loneliness. And that is a huge problem. We have a growing population of people 55 and older who are all living by themselves.
I just want to say, because you don't change the zoning ordinance very often, that I'd rather see time taken in that, and to get it as right as you can. We do have too many codes, and I know as when we talked about the inclusionary housing, said developers want to know what the rules are, and then they can plan and make as good decisions as they can for themselves and for the community. So,
Okay. Yeah, Trina.
So I had a very similar question to one of the ones raised by Chloe around ranking and prioritization of projects. Just wanting, and it could be a broad question, could take so many paths. And I know you said you're not there yet, but just wanted to just put it out there that
Sure.
What if, one, I'm really excited to hear about the competitive funding that could be coming from the state. But let's say within the 5 years, and this straddles the action plan as well, because the two work together. Let's say that funding gaps widen or are extended beyond expectation, or come in much below, significantly below expectations within that 3 to 5 year period. How would you rank and prioritize the projects? And I know you said you don't have that right now, but just
Well, and it isn't actually going to be a staff decision. The people who prioritize use of city resources and actually what we go after is our city council. And I think that's going to be a discussion. And that's one of the things we've talked about with the comprehensive plan. We do have, and we've said this all along, there are certain goals that do conflict. Getting everything all electric and addressing climate action as fully as we have in that plan does kind of butt heads with a lot of making things affordable and things like that. And, I wish I knew exactly how we were going to balance it all. But I think part of what we have to do is also be aware of what resources we have, but also how resources become available through other sources, which isn't always just going to be the federal government. The state government is stepping up, and I think we're going to see more of that. And to a certain extent, because, when you think of a municipality's basic responsibilities, providing affordable housing technically isn't one that's commonly said that that's a municipal responsibility. we're probably one of the countries that place the most responsibility for the biggest expense in everybody's life directly on that person or that family. And we don't have, even our public housing doesn't and never did function the way social housing does in some European cities. I mean, in Austria, I think that there's some enormous percentage of people who live in social housing, which is actually owned by the government, managed by it, but we don't have that. So it's how we can build affordability. We've got to go back to some things that used to be more in play. Cooperatives may come back and not be just ways of controlling who can live in your very expensive cooperative, which is kind of what a lot of them turned into in this country. But they can be ways of providing housing, even ownership opportunities and building equity without having to go out and buy a standalone dwelling unit that you own and are completely responsible for. And that's something that there's an increase in the housing world that's looking at affordable housing, is how can we develop more of that type of housing. And, sort of like when we have our houses in the land trust with Community Partners for Affordable Housing, you separate the cost of the land from the actual purchase price of the house, and you can more easily, you restrict it to resale to somebody in that same income. And there are people who say, well, then they don't get their full equity. Well, but the problem is if people always get their full equity, the value keeps increasing and increasing, the value of the property, and people's incomes don't necessarily go up with that. So we've got to look at a bunch of tools, and I think there have got to be more tools actually developed to address some of these problems that everybody's got to work on. It's a heavy, heavy lift, guys. And I'm glad that you're so interested, because we're going to need a lot of thought and a lot of ideas to make progress.
Emily?
I know that I'm new and I'm still trying to get caught up on this whirlwind of information. I know that zoning laws have changed in other municipalities in this country over the last few years, for example, Minneapolis. I know that the criticism is that, zoning can change, but maybe housing units won't increase or whatnot. Are there any projections being made by Evanston when looking at how other municipalities have done this a few years ago to see what we might expect in terms of an increase in the number of available housing units?
I don't have the absolute numbers in my head, but Minneapolis has increased its housing production
by about 45% in terms of in the last 3 or 4 years, I think.
And they've also seen a much lower increase in rental housing prices than the rest of the state. And again, I don't have those statistics in my head, but I'm
just curious if Evanston is looking, thinking about if there are projections that are going to be made available. I know that, of course, we don't want to get bogged down in too much data, too many data, but the idea being that what we can expect potentially in the city.
It is really hard to project that, and I don't think Minneapolis tried to really project that too specifically either, because housing is really driven by the private market, the development of housing in our country. And so what we have to do is allow the opportunity to build different housing types in different places. And we also have a lot in our single family residential districts, we have really a high percentage of owner occupancy. So a lot of it is the decision of the property owners. Now, one of the things I've heard over the years is to people, hey, frankly, my age about, who are saying, wow, my kids are all grown and gone, but I don't have any place in Evanston that I can move to that I want to. So I'm going to sit here in my larger house and not go away and leave it available to somebody who's younger and is going to raise a family there. So we've got that balancing act too. If we don't have the types of housing that people want to move into from how, like if they're outgrowing their house. Now, there's some really kind of funny ones. I mean, I don't know if any of you saw that Winnetka had approved some condominiums that they were developing, and they just do them as vanilla boxes, and then people pay several $1 million to buy the condo and then have the build out. And I'm like, well, I'm not looking for that kind of additional housing. But I think that, they're also, this, I'm kind of on a tangent here, but there are also things that we're seeing with younger people. They don't necessarily want yards and that responsibility. They want a more free of responsibility lifestyle. And rental, more people are renting, and it is not in just one income level. Higher income people are choosing to rent in cases where they haven't in the past. And I think I saw that right now the age of the average home buyer has gone up to 42 years old, which is vastly different from what it used to be. Part of that is it's hard to purchase right now because of the housing prices, and also interest rates are up, so that makes it difficult. But younger people aren't necessarily expecting to buy and own a house the way people did when I was that age.
So just to go back to Emily's question about Minneapolis and their experience, there was recently a Pew Research article was interesting and said that most of the housing growth has been in the larger buildings and very little, not nearly as much in the neighborhoods, but
exactly.
So
it's not a whole lot
it's
of.
going to be a gradual change, I think. Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the talk about the comprehensive plan and revising that. I think one of the things that council has discussed is that this was a really big lift for staff, and it was what, 25 years since we.
Yeah, the last comprehensive plan was 2000.
Yeah, so almost 25 years. So I think not having an antiquated document and like revising it every 5 years and making the small changes, then we wouldn't necessarily have it, maybe focus on what's not working and, leave what's, been productive. I think that's kind of the hopeful future plan for it. I just like the fact that Emily brought up Minneapolis and that this has been done in other places. So there hasn't been a seismic shift in R1 neighborhoods. I think there's a little bit of misinformation around floating out there that Director Flax addressed around setback, building height, footprint, and also I think a key component is that there will still be a lot of non-conforming lots that will still be restricted.
Yep.
I think back every so often I'll get emails about I got to notice that my neighbor has like a major variance, and then you look into it and it's like, well, the lot is small. It's been like that since it was built. And so I think cleaning a lot of this up will be positive in many ways, and I'm just looking forward to further discussion on this. So thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sarah. So I don't think the committee is going to have a written anything to send to council, but certainly the committee was very appreciative and complimentary to all the work that's gone into it, and I would say in general, we think it's a really good roadmap for the future.
Well, thank you. And if any of you want to email comments to our staff, then we'll compile something and we could run it by you and see if you feel it's appropriate. Is it, representing what you feel about your feedback and how you feel about the comprehensive plan. If that would be helpful, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be detailed stuff that you send us, but I mean, it just, we don't have to write a book, but if that can help provide input. And it is really important. We have boards, committees, and commissions specifically, and HCDC is one of those that, you know, because of what you're responsible for, your voices are important as a way of, you know, helping shape the comprehensive plan.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So we have just one more motion to make, which is to approve our meeting dates for 2025. Could I have a motion? That we have that, at the very end of our packet was a list of the dates for our.
Sure, I will make a motion to approve the HCDC 2025 proposed meeting dates.
I second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Oh, I thought we usually didn't meet in August.
Oh dear, was there?
We
an
don't
August meeting?
normally, and that one probably should be removed.
Yeah, we don't, we kept it because it's been a recent one. And so usually it gets canceled, but I didn't want to have to re-vote in case we weren't,
Okay.
that meeting in
I
August
get
wasn't
it.
happening.
Just in
A
case.
bunch of us were told to cancel it for others, but don't worry. One of the things I want to note is there may be some questions or thoughts like, what happens with, you know, the move to 909 Davis and things like that. So one of the things that is being actively worked on is we don't have quite the same number of meeting rooms that we have, you know, here. And so there's also going to be, there's work looking, because we have a lot of meetings that sometimes meet at the same date. So we may have to make some adjustments in schedules at some point. That's all being worked on. But meetings will continue in this building through the end of March. So
Sorry about
that's
that.
an important thing to know. Okay?
Yeah. And our next meeting is going to be January 21st. So look forward to seeing everybody then. And I think we've 9:30. A very full agenda and lots of really important issues. Very helpful discussion. So thank you, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Oh yeah, exactly.